Hello to everyone on the show today listening in. This should be another fun conversation. My name is Raymond Posch. This is a New Ways of Being podcast, and it's a brand new episode with my guests, Gail and Gregory Hoag. Hello to you. Thanks for joining.
You.
Thank you, Ray.
All right. Well, Gail and Greg have, I think it's a fairly recent book. I guess I don't know exactly when it came out, but a book called Sacred Geometry. And when I was when I found out about you guys and was looking at you as a possible guests, I do a little bit of exploration to see if I think it's a good fit or not. And one of the things that really impressed me was there were some testimonials that I saw about your book from people I was very familiar with, like Joe Vitale and several others, and um, that stood out to me because I really respect what they do. And as I said, I was not too acquainted with uh, you and what you do, but today with the audience audience here with us, let's learn about sacred geometry and subtle energy. And I know you produce some incredible products, so we can talk a little bit about that. But sacred geometry is something that I've not discussed on any of my shows before. And, I, I had a long period of spiritual exploration where I got into many different things. And so I've read a little bit about sacred geometry over the years, but sounds like you take it to a fairly deep level. So we want to find out about that. And let's start by letting, one of you or both of you tell your story and, how you got to today and what you're doing today, and then we'll take it from there. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Raymond. Um, so I have a background as an artist and had really been developing my intuitive skills for many years. And one of the big influences on me was Buckminster Fuller. And he was the one who he created the geodesic dome. He coined the word synergetics. And I was really fascinated with his work. When I moved to Colorado from the East Coast, I was actually working as a channel where through meditation, I
Oh,
would go inside and just really ask for wisdom to come forth to me. And because I had been very a follower of Buckminster Fuller, and he had recently passed away, this was back in the mid 80s, I just asked, I said, would you be willing to share information with me? And I started to get these conversations, these downloads that were absolutely fascinating and very much in line with what I had read in his books and had actually heard him lecture.
wow.
So what happened for me was that it got deeper and deeper. It got more scientific. Because I didn't have a science background, I said at that point, wait a minute, this is going over my head. So either send me somebody who I can do something with this great work, or let's just kind of simmer this thing down. And it was probably within just a couple of weeks of that I met Gregory. And we met in a house that a friend of mine had purchased from him. And she was renovating it. I had brought paintings in from the East Coast, was checking on my paintings in a garage, and there was Gregory. And he was carrying a box of these different geometries. And they had
Oh,
all these different tetrahedrons.
uh-huh.
Tetrahedron is a three-dimensional triangle. And so that kind of got our conversation started, and we realized we had a lot in common. And I really got the message inside that we had work to do. Well, we had a lifetime of work to do, it turns out. And so that's kind of how I got into sacred geometry, other than the fact that I've always been um, wanting to explore the understanding of universe.
Mm.
And as an artist, to look deeply into it and to try to see how does creation really happen? Outside of what science says about the big, all of this stuff. But what I really wanted to understand is, how is this universe constructed? And geometry, sacred geometry, was really what spoke to me and helped me understand what it all is really about. So Gregory came into my life, and there he is.
So
Yes.
for me, the reason I had this box of geometries was a number of years before. After a decade, I graduated in 1970 from college, and I studied the sciences. And then during the 70s, while having several businesses, I also was pursuing spiritual enlightenment through different I joined different ashrams. I worked
Wow.
with different spiritual masters, and I still had businesses going, which was kind of an anomaly. But in the end, I built a pyramid that cost, in today's dollars, close to $250,000. And it was only 10 feet high, but full of all types of crystals, 2 feet across, crystal balls. And what happened is it set off my Kundalini. Now, you may have come across that in your spiritual seeking and questioning. What it is where the energy from the earth is moving back through a person's body, reaching for the higher self, actually. It's trying to bring the two together. And it was an amazing experience, but it was also a somewhat painful experience because I was having holes burned in my hands and feet just from the subtle energy
Wow.
moving through my body. So it made me realize this subtle energy stuff, it's not so subtle. I mean, it can physically shift everything within a physical body. And so what happened was it opened me up to higher perception and higher understanding. So I started building the things I was seeing, and I had no idea what sacred geometry was. I couldn't even name the platonic solids. I didn't know what things were. I just was building what I was seeing, what the beings I was communicating with, were suggesting that I start doing. And that's what led us on this journey. And that's been almost 40 years now
Wow.
since we've embarked on our business with metaforms, creating tools that relate to higher dimensional energy. And that's the amazing thing about sacred geometry, which we could go into for a little bit if you like.
Well, let me just kind of say where I'm at relative to that. So I've encountered sacred geometry over the years, but never really studied it. And at this point, I don't know the power of sacred geometry. I don't see. I know it's a subtle kind of knowledge, and I don't see it as something as obvious to me how that fits into understanding the world or the universe. But yeah, I'll let you talk some more about that. And I do want to just kind of clarify. So I do have experience now with subtle energy. And it all started for me with crystals. Someone who I respect said that he used crystals and it had changed his life. And up till then, I was kind of skeptical about it. And I said, well, I'm going to give it a try. And what I found is I felt the difference immediately. And I do folk music performances for seniors, among other things. And what I noticed was doing those performances, I could feel the difference. There was just something, a more of a
Right.
easier flow that was happening. And so uh, that got
Well,
me, that
yeah,
got me,
Ray,
go ahead.
one of the things is that the reason crystals do what they do is because of their molecular structure, their geometry.
Mhm.
You
Oh,
see, what you have in something like a six-sided crystal, quartz crystal of silicon dioxide, those molecules of silicon and oxygen, the way they bond together, and the way they then bond with other molecules, they form spirals. And those spirals are made up of tetrahedrons. So those tetrahedrons link corner to corner and spiral through trillions and quadrillions of times in one crystal.
mhm.
And when you stack the geometries on top of each other, and there's a space for the energy to spiral because that's how energy moves. Even what we call light, it doesn't move as a wave going up and down.
Right.
It spirals through space. So
Oh,
the natural way energy likes to move is spiraling. And so when you have a crystal, you have the potential for energy to flow through it. And then what happens is, even though we look like we're mostly physical, 99.99999% of us is pure energetic space. And so everything in the universe is made up of energy. And the way that energy moves into matter, the way it takes form, it does it through different types of atoms, molecules. It follows patterns that we can see in the way plants grow, in the way human beings grow, in the way the DNA is structured.
hmm.
So we can understand everything, everything in reality in this universe that we bump into, we can understand from a geometric perspective.
Wow.
And and so sometimes we don't realize that we are surrounded by all these particular types of geometries. Now, when we go into nature and we sit by a stream and we feel the sun moving against our face, and the truth is that sun, those actual photons that are hitting us, they have a geometry too. And that was recently discovered by some Polish scientists. And
Wow.
that geometry, when we bring that geometry into a big scale, like for those that are watching us on YouTube, they can see some of the geometries beside us that are spinning and moving. And what happens is we can take the natural way of doing things, and in nature, it feels so wonderful to be there.
Right.
It's a totally different feeling than being in the city sometimes, where we have a lot of concrete around us, a lot of rebar that cuts out the natural frequencies, and
Hmm.
that we are surrounding ourselves with lights that are vibrating at 60 hertz per second. And we have computers and toxins in our environment. And all these things disrupt our field. They separate us from what's real. So what we have been doing for the last 40 years is discovering how does creation do it? And then we follow those patterns. And when we bring them into our lives, just like when you brought the geometries of the different crystals, and when you bring in certain other elements, like a citrine actually has titanium mixed in with it. And that titanium atom makes a difference in the energy. We vibrate with things and we don't even realize that we're in this sea of energy, and it's a vibrational field and a vibrational sea that's affecting how we vibrate and how we interact with reality.
Hey, Greg, thank you for that wonderful explanation. You covered quite a bit of ground there in understanding more about crystals and sacred geometry. And wow, and you said several things that I had not heard before, or I had not made the connection to. One was you said, I think a lot of people have heard that, we as our physical bodies and much of matter is primarily space. But you used the word energetic space. And I don't think I had heard that before. I think we think of energy as, created by some source and flowing through space. And so we might not think of space as being full of energy, but, I've certainly heard that is true as well. And, one of the things that I've discovered, just so you understand where I'm coming from, since I got my crystal pendants, prior to that, I had occasionally felt some connection to the divine, or felt like I was having some communication, but not reliably, not frequently. After I got the crystals, then it suddenly clicked. In my first case, I was able to communicate with angels and conversations with God and other guides. And so I knew that opened up something, and I came to understand that it was my spiritual energy level primarily that enabled that. But the other thing I've really learned is that subtle energy seems to be, at least with the help of the crystals, available on demand. If I think of more energy flowing into me, I immediately feel more energy flowing into me. And so it's very creative. And so energy must be there, or be total or non-local. I don't know, exactly which, but it sounds like you've really researched it over those years. So thank you for all the explanations.
Yeah. Well, Raymond, I like to take it back to like the simple understanding that everything is energy. And so what does that really mean? And it's interesting when we look at some of these great photographs that are coming from, the Hubble telescope and whatever, you can see these gaseous bodies that are always changing and in formation and in the creative process. And it's all this energy. Well, before we are in our physical state, we're in an energetic state. And all of creation is like that. When our soul leaves this body is dead, right? When the soul enters the body, there's life. And when we go back and we look at energy, so energy, just this incredible opportunity for something to happen, this creation, is waiting for some way to come into this physical dimension. So we believe that there's different dimensions and that we are multi-dimensional beings, and that we can stretch ourselves rather, to interact with different dimensions. And so when I think about how energy comes into form, well, how does it do that? It has to come in some way that is clear and precise and dependable, right? So that it will continue to happen over and over and over again in the same way. And what I love about sacred geometry is that it shows us that there is that precision in creation. There are rhythms and cycles and patterns and numbers and all kinds of things, so that we're living in a universe that isn't just some chaotic, random universe, even though at times it seems pretty chaotic at random. Actually, there's extraordinary order to it all. And like Gregory was explaining about the patterns of the crystals, there are patterns, geometric patterns, and the way that the spirals will work. And it will continue to happen in all of creation, whether it's a plant, an animal, a rock, a body, a celestial body. There's that same dimension that keeps working through us over and over and over again. And that is, I think, a really important part of understanding ourselves. Because so there's all this form, and this is founded in consciousness. It's not just this random thing that just, science is saying this just kind of shows up here. There's actually consciousness that holds it all together. And in our exploration, what we find is that consciousness is love. So when we are connected to that consciousness, then we're able to plug in to all of what's available to us. So we can plug into the hearing the messages of angels, of God, of different creative forces, animal whisperers, that are able to communicate with animals. They're working on certain frequencies where they can interact. And so that's really all available for us. And so our work has been really dedicated to supporting people to be able to more strongly establish those natural connections so that they can have the experience of being fully human. And fully human is much more than just this physical body and this physical dimension, what we can see, hear, feel, and touch. It goes way, way beyond that.
Yes. Yes. And I've heard people who I respect that, that say that we exist in multiple dimensions. Actually, right now, we don't have to go somewhere. But most of us don't experience those aspects, at least in this lifetime, of course. So you were saying something there that was kind of, I totally agree. Consciousness is life. I believe that consciousness is the ultimate source. And I kind of think, I don't know if this is the way you think of it, but I think of energy as a step above or a step below consciousness, however you want to say it. In order to move into the physical, it is through energy. But I don't know if you think of it that way, but do you?
Ray, it's just like earlier when I talked about energetic space. Empty space does not exist. Nothing exists without consciousness. Consciousness is what permeates everything. So energy has awareness, consciousness. It moves through the universe through something that we refer to as harmonic resonance. So when something is resonant with something else, there is an exchange, there is a flow between them. And just to get back to talking about the human being in multiple dimensions, for those that are watching on YouTube, I'd like to share this image, which is a picture of us. We are like icebergs. That's the metaphor. And I've turned it upside down so that that little bit that we see at the top of the iceberg is at the bottom, because everything in our reality comes first. And so when we're talking together, we're like the tips of the icebergs communicating. But the emotional body, that exists, our emotions on another dimensional level. And that's why some people can see auras or see colors around people. And some of what they're seeing is that person's emotions and what's going on that level that's invisible to a lot of us. You know, we can react to someone's anger, but we sometimes can't say we can see it. We can feel sometimes when a room is off. You know, we are in touch with some of these subtle things. And then on another emotional or another dimensional level, I should say, is the mental level, which is working with time. And there are some people that can tune in and work with what's going to happen in the future or tune in to a past life. It's almost as if time doesn't exist in that dimensional realm. We can bend it. And yet that's around our body. That's part of us too, all the way up to soul. And soul is certainly an essential part of us. As Gail said earlier, without soul, we wouldn't be in existence. And yet what's happening is we are focused on what we can bump into. And when you brought a crystal and other crystals into your life, it started working with the subtle aspects of your being so that you could have an energy flow with some higher dimensional parts of yourself, parts where you referred to conversations with God, angelic realms, guidance. None of them are sitting on your lampshade back there. I haven't seen them, but you felt them and communicated with them because of some shift on the physical dimension that you did and went through with the crystals. So let me show you another picture with this iceberg, and let's imagine on the right, we have another metaphor, which is a boat on top of the ocean, pumping air down to a deep sea diver. And that's like us. We're getting that energy from soul all the time. If it weren't there, if we weren't connected, we would die. We would leave our body. This body is animated by those higher dimensional energies. And so the next image I'm going to share is that energy wants to flow all the time. And yet these are some of the things in our world, in our environment, that block that flow of energy, that keep us from being fully expanded human beings. And that is the electromagnetic pollution, the computers, the cell phones, the different frequencies running through our environment, the stress that we feel. When we get stressed, science says we're more often than not going to go towards sickness because stress breaks down and blocks a lot of things in the physical body, but it's blocking that flow of energy too, as well as negative emotions, the anger, the sadness, the guilt, all those negative things that we feel form a shield around us in that fourth dimensional emotional body I was talking about. And it makes it hard for the love to get through, for the consciousness to get through, because that's where love comes from. That's where joy comes from. It comes from that higher aspect of ourself. And the judgments that we have, the beliefs and the toxins, all of these different things in our environment make it difficult for us to feel totally the fullness of our being and the love that we are. And that's where the tools that we build, and we call them tools because these geometries, they vibrate with energy, they bring energy in. It's kind of like a hammer is a tool. And if I were to give you a hammer, you might build a house, you might crack a walnut, you might hit your thumb, and it's not the hammer's fault. And when you're done building the house, you built the house, not the hammer. So I like to think of tools as empowering and helping us leverage energy, especially when so much of our technological environment is blocking us, impinging upon us. So we are creating a technology that can open up that field for higher connection. And it's just like the simple crystal that you started working with and taking that to a much, much more focused degree in working with energy.
Well, very good. Again, thank you for the analogy, the slides that you shared. I had not heard that analogy used that way before, but I think that was probably helpful for a lot of people. And I noticed that both of you are wearing pendants, which I assume are tools, the kind of tools you're talking about. So, yeah, tell us how one of those pendants, and I've seen them on your website, so I've seen the up close view before, but how that's different than just a crystal by itself.
Well, something that's different about our pendants, and we do utilize a special crystal in there. There's different gems and things that have a resonance. However, that's a part of it. And what we're doing is we're taking the principles of sacred geometry and we're on the face of our pendants. And the pendants are actually two-sided. So they have two different, for whoever is watching this right now, one side, we call it the star face, and that helps move the energy up. And these are geometries that then have different gemstones that are embedded into these pendants. And on the other side, we call that the earth face. And those are certain geometries that help the energy move down and become more grounded, more connected to Mother Earth. And those are really important, the geometries on the outside, but it's what's on the inside that really makes it exceptional. We have over 35 different antenna systems inside the pendant. So the pendant has, like a little cup to it in a way. And everything is handmade. Everything that we do is handmade. And we make it all here in Colorado. Inside, these different antenna systems are created so that they resonate with all the things that we've been talking about, with the natural structure of universe. And what that does for us is it helps us maintain the connection to who we really are, the connection to our creativity, to our intuition, to soul, to higher guidance, all of those kinds of things. So what happens is that our lives start to shift. We are resonating on a different level. Our vibrational field has shifted. And it's just like, when you feel happy, things just come to you in a different way than when you're feeling distraught. And so this is a field that helps us be more connected to that higher level of who we are. And people's lives shift. For instance, we've had people talk about how their relationships changed, that they didn't just find themselves acting on automatic pilot. They were more conscious in their communications. They could step back and listen. They could enable themselves to really take advantage of these connections so that the relationships would be more of what they really wanted. We've had people talk about how they were working on projects that were just like not going anywhere. They got the pendant and all of a sudden everything started to come together. Intuition really skyrockets because of these connections. Things like serendipity, like when, you think about somebody and the next thing that happens is the phone rings.
Right.
Well, guess what? That's normal. But because we've not been in a place where we're resonating with what actually is normal in the universe, it doesn't happen as much for us. But when we are, everything starts to change. So, people start connecting in with the right people and have a higher sense of purpose. And even things like procrastination. I noticed that was one of the big things for me. When I started to wear the pendant, I realized that I didn't procrastinate at all anymore. It was my purpose, my sense of self was really more front and center, so that the way that I operated was really different.
Right. Okay. So you've said some really good things here that I want to try to remember to come back to. I want to go back to Greg's slide for just a moment, or slides. And, you were talking about, you had a perspective of that everything is energy based. I mean, you've both said that. And the kind of depths of our being, and we could describe it as dimensional, but like I'm thinking back to past programs I've done over the past several years, and a lot of my focus was on beliefs. That we believe in, we're ego driven, which is mental. And so we believe that we are separate from everything else. And that out of that comes a lot of fear, I would say, separation, belief in separation. But so you're telling us, though, that it's much, much deeper than that, that since everything is energy, I think you could look at it as totally from an energetics perspective, or maybe there's some combination of the different perspectives, or maybe talking about beliefs and mindset that is at a mental level and not, it's like ignoring the energy aspect. So yeah, comment on that, because I know a lot of people probably come from the same kind of perspective that, they might understand subtle energy a little bit, but maybe don't see the full picture, so.
Well,
Go ahead.
Ray, what you were describing when you were talking about the ego and about us all being separate, that's all that exists at that little tip of the iceberg. So as long as we exist only in this physical world that we can bump into and trip over, we're going to think that, oh, that's separate from me. And this ego that develops, and we need that when we're first born into this world, we develop this little character that starts going, me, and I'm in relation to all of them, and I've got to get what I need so that I can survive.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so much of our drive is about survival. And it's only when we start moving into the bigger part of ourselves where we start discovering the that we're really connected to everything, that love exists because of the way everything comes together, and that when we start exploring the bigger part of ourselves, then we feel the connection to what's real. Then it's possible to see that we can be here to be of service to all because all is us. We are serving ourselves, and the more we are in service to all, the more universe can support us in our process. Because service to others doesn't mean that you leave yourself out of the equation.
Right.
So I know that as long as we are caught in these emotions that are just, we hang on to them because they're familiar, the negative ones. And the truth is that the body, our physical body, is creating the emotion of fear. And that morphs into sadness and anger and guilt. All the other negative emotions are aspects of fear, and that all comes from the physical body at the tip of the iceberg saying, I need to survive. No one else really has my best interests as much as I do. And yet, when we start to break through that barrier of negative emotions, then we start seeing higher self, that love, that soul. That's what it sends us. It sends us the joy. It sends us the excitement. That's why, Gail talking about procrastination, that's partially the excitement to keep going on a project, to stay focused on a project. That's when we're connected to the bigger part of our being. The small part of our being thinks small, feels small, acts
Right.
small,
Right.
and it separates and it has a hard time doing things. And so it's such an amazing perspective shift when we start working with this expanded form of energy.
Right.
And the way the universe does it, even the diameter of the moon and the diameter of the earth and the diameter of the sun,
Yeah.
they all follow very particular geometric patterns that I can, show you more slides where you add up these geometries and they equal exactly these different diameters. And
Wow.
then you take some, so by that, for those that can see, I will show you something. Um, it's like here we have the measure of the diameter of the moon as 2,160 miles. Well, if you take a cube, that's 2,160 degrees. They exactly match, they
Hmm.
resonate.
Hmm.
If you take time, like we are just in the process, some people are talking about moving into the age of Aquarius, out
Mhm.
of Pisces.
Fifth
Each
dimension.
age, but each age is exactly 2,160 years. So you see what's starting to happen there is there's a relationship between measure, miles, time, years, degrees, space, totally different measures, same numbers. And we see that again and again in sacred geometry. And what makes geometry sacred is when energy flows. And so geometries that allow for the flow of energy. And when I was talking about here, these are the different geometries, you add up their surface, multiply by 100, and you get the diameter of the sun. Another group gives us the diameter of the earth. The cube is the diameter of the moon. And then we can do different things with adding up the diameter of the moon and the earth. And now you have the number of degrees of a geometry that, for those of you that are seeing me sit here on your YouTube channel, it's this geometry right behind me.
Mhm.
That has a resonance to the sun, the moon, and it also resonates with the way human beings are created around a particular geometry called the phi ratio.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the moon,
that.
the earth, they dance together in a way where it's affecting all life. It's affecting the way humans grow, plants grow, animals grow. The DNA of everything
Right.
follows these same proportions. So when we bring these geometries into our life, what can start to happen is we shift our resonance. And, you know, you're such an easy guy to talk to about that because you've had this experience
Mhm.
where you brought something like a crystal. I don't know. And you felt the difference. You felt it in your body. You acknowledged it in your consciousness.
Right.
You know, your emotions started shifting. You said you felt easier. It was just the way things flowed. It was nicer. So, you know, all of this, the
Yes.
more we follow the way the universe does it, if we dance with the universe, we're going to be dancing rather than having our feet stepped on.
Okay. Thank you for sharing the slide. One thing that was on the slide that kind of resonated with me was you had that when you use the word resonance, it's in harmony with, and I'm a musician and a singer, so I know about that from a musical perspective. But you
Mhm.
said, and different people who are listening in or watching will have, grab a hold of many different things. And so all of those relationships that you talked about really is fascinating, but kind of making it a little more simpler. I I grabbed hold of the what you were saying about the universe is one whole. Everything in existence is one great whole. We are parts of that. And so the kind of tools that we're talking about that you create and that crystals provide, et cetera, help us connect to it in other ways than the way we normally operate.
Mhm.
And so getting back, you talk about connection, and connection is very important. You know, it's interesting that connection is really a way of thinking about something. Since we're a part of this great whole, though, and all of us and everything is a part of that great whole, we all are connected at a deep level that we don't even realize. So it's like getting back to what those connections really are. Yeah. Oh, you've been sharing some great information here, and we are starting to get a little bit short on time. Um, I do want to let you talk a little bit more about your book. I'm assuming that like some of the information on the slides come from the book. Is that right?
All of them. These are all images that are in the book. There are 72 images in the book. And so a lot of pictorial information. It makes it easier to hopefully understand some of the things we're talking about.
Well, I like about, what both of you have said, because, when we talk about other dimensions, it's always kind of like a matter of perspective. We can't understand readily something that's at a higher perspective than we are, right? We have to somehow rise to a higher perspective, a higher dimension. And then when we do, we say, I suddenly see that now. So every higher dimension takes us to greater depth or greater height of perspective, however we want to say it. And so your explanations, I think, have really been helpful for me, and I'm sure for other people as well. So I love what you're talking about. I'm going to have to get a hold of your book and read that book and find out more about what you're saying. Say a few more words about your book, and then I'd like to chat just a moment about what you said in the very beginning about the pyramid that you built. And I know you say that there are energy vortexes on your property in Colorado. I'm in Colorado as well. So, tell us about the book first, and then we'll talk about where you live.
Great. Well, the book, the title of the book is Sacred Geometry, the Universal Language of Divine Alignment. We just published it in January. And actually, if you can see this now, read the website URL. It's iconnecttoall.com is our website. And we're offering a free chapter. And the chapter that we're offering is about consciousness. We start off the book talking about what is consciousness. So that's how we approach all of this, is how it relates to the oneness, the consciousness. And so I connect the word and then the number 2 and then the word all, all.com/chapter will get you access to coming to our website on a special page and getting access to the first chapter. From there, if you would like to get deeper into the information, because there's a lot there, lots of pictures, different slides that we've created, lots of great information. We've been doing this work for over 40 years. And so we've accumulated a lot. And so it was really a challenge to figure out just what are we going to put into this book. And I think that it will be a journey that you can take to understand not only sacred geometry, but understand yourself and universe in a way of that wholeness, that oneness of what all of us really is. So I invite you to check out that chapter.
Yeah, and I find it totally appropriate that you start with consciousness, because I believe that the universe originates out of pure consciousness, and so that's where we are connected. But makes total sense to me that you talk about consciousness first, and I've always found that very fascinating, because it sounds to most people, I think it sounds so abstract. They don't know quite how to get a hold of it. And one of the ways kind of I've learned to get a hold of it is focusing on awareness. in terms of ourself, the more that we are in awareness as opposed to thinking and trapped in the mind, the more that we can connect to the universe. So thank you. And I hope listeners, you got that and wrote it down. iconnecttoall.com/chapter. That tells you their website name, but it tells you where to get the free chapter from the book. Now, anything more you want to say about the book before we wrap up with something else?
Well, even though it gets into a lot of detail and technical information, it's what we're hearing from people is it's very readable. People are understanding it, and the pictures really help to flesh it out more. And I think it's a great way to begin a journey into understanding sacred geometry in a way that's really pretty different from most other sacred geometry books. So it's rather unique.
And by the way, I'm so glad you're here with me today in this show because I guess I had my perspective on sacred geometry was pretty superficial and it seemed somewhat abstract. And how does all that connect to reality? It's not something we see visibly in the world necessarily. Except I do know, what you said about building that pyramid. I follow the Ancient Alien shows, and in there, and I think in some other shows I've seen where it's been totally demonstrated that pyramids connect to a power, and it may be both at a physical level and a subtle level. So, there's all of that. But this has just been fascinating, and now I have a better sense of it. But I'm going to have to read your book so I can keep digging deeper into it. So tell us.
Okay,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, what were you going to ask, Ray?
Well, I wanted to ask about, what have you experienced? And I've heard of energy vortices, being a common thing around the world, that some people, connect to that energy that they feel. And yeah, tell us a little bit about that and what you've learned about what's on your property in Colorado.
Okay. Well, when we first moved in to this property in 2000, what happened is that first year there were about 6 or 7 lightning strikes on the mountain behind us, all along the edge of that mountain. And some big fires started, some 40-acre, 60-acre fires.
Mhm.
And it was getting a little uncomfortable, disconcerting. And then our guidance explained that they were actually using those lightning strikes to open rifts dimensionally between higher dimensions and the mountain so we could start using the mountain more. And
Wow.
I'd be in my shop, I'd hear a lightning strike, I'd come out, the sky would be totally blue, and there'd be one little tiny dark black cloud over the base of this mountain. And it was like, wow, this is really weird. And then the top of the mountain has a double peak, actually a triple peak, and it has a large quartz outcropping. So where we live, the land, the rock that we built our house on, it's full of quartz balls that were part of this sandstone that was formed over 300 million years ago. It's called Arcosic sandstone.
Wow.
And so on a higher level. I mean, it's like now we're talking about levels of Earth, and the different levels. We only discovered that when the Grand Canyon was discovered, and they could see the different levels of rock and realize that the Earth's time can be measured through different layers. And our human being is expressed through different layers of our being. So when you were talking about awareness, it's expanding the awareness of our higher dimensional aspects. Now that you're working with guidance and angels and feel that presence in your life, your energy starts expanding to that. Your awareness starts expanding to that.
Mhm.
And that's going to shift your view of who Raymond is and
Yes.
what Raymond does. And it's like, isn't that fun? You get to watch this character grow, and you don't have to take him so personally because he's just a little part of you. You start feeling a bigger part of you that can't necessarily be seen or easily explained. And so on our land, I diverged, we open these energy flows, and then there's about 13 major vortexes where the
Wow.
energy flows. And what I've done is I've put geometries over these spots so that the geometries help with the energy flow. They stabilize it. They work with it. Just like you noticed that you could shift your energy by bringing your attention to it. Intent is one of the most important things for subtle energy.
Mm.
It follows the way our mind goes, which is why people who worry about stuff have more things to worry about,
Right.
because that's the way they've chosen to create it. They don't realize what they're doing to themselves.
Right.
Each of us have so much to understand how we are nice to ourselves and mean to ourselves, and and
Right.
we can make a difference.
Right.
We are the only ones who really can. Others can tell us stuff, but until we take it internally and go, okay, I have the power to create the kind of person and life I want to be, I'm going to focus on that. And I'm going to love where I am, because all the things I've been doing for all these years have led up to this moment and this understanding. And so
Yes.
anyway,
Well,
I think that's enough for now. I want Gail to say some things before we leave.
yes, thanks, Greg, for what you said, and for the benefit of the listening audience, I'd like to say, to build on what you said, you described to us, a miracle that happened on your property that changed your relationship to the property, and I've learned that once you start raising your energy to a high enough level, not only can you begin to communicate with the greater universe, let's say, I've started using the term divine wholeness, um, because sometimes I've been interacting with angels, or or think that I am, or interacting with God, and I've asked, are you angels, or are you God, or who are you? And the answer I always get is, does it matter?
Good
Because
answer.
it's one great whole. But the door opens to miracles as well, because they
Mhm.
want to share in miracles, help us live better lives, live more to our full universal divine character, our divine nature. So, Gail, yeah, did you want to add something?
Uh, can I say one thing first? It's like when you're talking about, opening up to these different informations, it's important that people understand that they always set the conditions of love, and only working with beings of love and beings of consciousness. And no being or love or consciousness would ever ask you to do anything that would create separation, that would create lack of love. You know, it's not, if you have a moral sense, nothing is going to tell you to do something that goes against that moral sense of what's right or wrong. And so always trust that in the way you deal
Yes.
with all this information in the universe.
Thank you for sharing that, because I do know that there are people, when we talk about energy, who focus on negative energies, and so it's good to understand that when we talk about the divine level, it is all good. Gail.
It is. It is about love, and it is about consciousness. All of the work that we've done over these years has really been about how we can make a contribution to raising consciousness here on this planet for ourselves and for each one of us, and for the planet and all the life on this planet. And the more we understand it, the more we open to that, and we really context it in that foundation of love, then what we create will bring us to that divine potential of who we are. And that's really what it's all about.
Very good. Thank you. And that's great to end on, because I do know a lot of people are have been going through transformation, have been working on themselves spiritually, and they want to know how can I make a difference? How can I make the world a better place? And so what you just said, definitely points to that. But from my perspective, I would now say it all begins by raising your consciousness, raising your energy, your frequency, and without crystals or the other things that can be done, people can begin to do that. And I know probably most people listening to this have focused more on love and being unconditional love, and that is a big step up, a big step forward. But there's more. So, and you offer many other things that can help that. So thank you so much for being on the show today and telling us all that you have learned, and sharing that with the audience. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And we're all on this path, I think, to keep ascending to greater understanding and participation in the good things that are happening in the universe. So so for the audience, be sure to learn more about Greg and Gail Hoag on their website, iconnecttoall.com. They told us about the free chapter for the book that they offer. And I know that they have many products, and I don't know if you have. I've listened to a couple of your guided meditations that are quite powerful too. So thank you again for being here. Any final words that you'd like to share?
Have to be careful.
Few words.
Opening me up.
Just a few.
Few words. Thank you. Thank you. It's so important to understand that universe is a positive universe, and that as you were talking, Ray, and seeing it as a divine whole, that we can feel part of that, and that solves so many of the problems we experience in the world by going inside and making that connection. And we're all working on that together as a team. And it's a wonderful time to be alive.
Very good. To my listening audience, I know that you've enjoyed this as much as I have. This has been an incredible conversation, but we come to an end. So Have a great day and a great life.
Blessings.
Thank you and blessings.